The moment that changed everything didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, over candlelight and linen napkins, in a restaurant my fiancé chose because he said it felt appropriate for an adult conversation. Halfway through my pasta, he set his fork down and said, almost casually, "I don't think I can marry a teacher." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. The clink of silverware, the low murmur of nearby tables, the soft Italian music, it all blurred together as his words floated between us, heavy and wrong. "I grew up comfortable," he continued. "My dad made six figures my entire life. I can't sign up for struggling. I want more. Travel. A good house. Good schools for our kids." Then he said it, the phrase that lodged itself in my chest. Teacher salary. The way you might say burden or mistake. People were listening. I could feel it. Heads subtly angled our way, but he didn't lower his voice. He didn't seem embarrassed. He seemed resolved. "I'm 32 years old. I teach high school history. I make about $65,000 a year. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. It's meaningful. I love my students. I love walking into a classroom and watching understanding dawn on a teenager's face. I've done this job for a decade, and I've never once been ashamed of it. Until that moment. I remember noticing how calm my hands looked resting on the table, even though my heart was racing so hard I could feel it in my throat. "I understand your concerns," I said, and I meant it. At least I thought I did. He actually looked relieved, like this was going better than expected. "We can keep this civil," he said. "No drama." So I reached for my phone. There are moments in life when time stretches, when every breath feels deliberate. I opened an app I rarely talked about, turned the screen toward him, an account balance built quietly over 12 years. Nearly $1 million. The poor teacher he was walking away from was wealthier than his executive father. The look on his face, that was the real beginning of the story. Because in that second, I realized something devastatingly clear. He never loved me. He loved an idea of worth that had nothing to do with who I actually was. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. We didn't start out as a mismatch. If anything, in the beginning, it felt improbably easy. We met 3 years ago through mutual friends, one of those low-pressure dinners where no one expects anything meaningful to come out of it. I remember thinking he was charming in a polished, effortless way. Marketing executive, confident, well-spoken, the kind of man who ordered wine without looking at the price and talked about career trajectories like they were weather patterns, inevitable, predictable, always moving upward. I was upfront from the start. "I'm a teacher," I told him on our second date, waiting for the flicker of disappointment I'd seen before. Instead, he smiled. "That's noble, important work." I believed him. Our lives moved at different speeds, but they seemed compatible. He worked long hours, traveled for conferences, came home with stories about office politics and quarterly goals. I graded papers at night, packed lunches in the morning, spent my days managing classrooms full of teenagers who tested boundaries and patience in equal measure. He liked to tease me about my routines, how I still drove my paid-off 2015 Civic, how I brought leftovers instead of ordering out, how I skipped destination vacations. "You're so disciplined," he'd say, like it was a quirk. I never corrected him. Money was something I treated quietly, almost privately. Not because I was hiding anything malicious, but because I'd learned early that the moment people knew, the dynamic shifted. My grandfather taught me that. When he died, he left me $5,000. Not a fortune. Just enough to matter if you respected it. I was 20, still in college. I invested it instead of spending it. Then I kept going, $500 a month, every month, no matter what. Dividend stocks, index funds, time, patience. While other people upgraded cars, I paid mine off. While others chased lifestyle inflation, I lived below my means. 12 years of quiet consistency. I never framed it as sacrifice. It was a choice. When we got engaged 6 months ago, it felt like a natural progression. 3 years together, no explosive fights, no cheating, just assumptions quietly stacking on top of each other. His family loved that he was doing well. My job barely registered to them. A footnote. His father, an executive vice president, had always spoken to me politely, but distantly, like someone humoring a phase. His mother complimented my patience often, not my intelligence, not my ambition, just my patience. I noticed. I just didn't confront it. Wedding planning revealed more than I expected. Venues he favored were expensive. Guest lists skewed heavily toward his side. Conversations always drifted back to lifestyle, neighborhoods, private schools, what kind of future we were building. Whenever money came up, I listened more than I spoke. Because here's the thing, I wanted to know who he thought I was without my net worth. And for 3 years, he never asked. So when he sat across from me at that restaurant, telling me he couldn't marry a teacher, he wasn't betraying me in that moment. He was confirming something that had been quietly true all along. I just hadn't wanted to see it. The signs didn't arrive all at once. They slipped in quietly, disguised as practicality, as concern, as realism. It started with comments that sounded harmless on the surface. "You work so hard," he'd say, watching me grade essays late at night. "Sometimes I worry you don't think big enough." Or, "I just want us to be comfortable. I don't want money to be a stressor." He said us, but somehow the weight of that concern always leaned in my direction. When his friends talked about promotions, bonuses, equity packages, he leaned forward in his chair. When the conversation turned to my classroom, my students, my curriculum, the quiet victories of teaching, his attention softened. Not dismissive, just absent, like it belonged to a different category, a different tier. Once, at a dinner with his colleagues, someone asked what I did. "High school history teacher," I said. There was a polite pause, then the conversation moved on. Later that night, he laughed it off. "They're just not used to that world," he said. "Corporate bubble." But the bubble never seemed to include me. When we talked about buying a house someday, he pulled up listings far above what I would have suggested. When I hesitated, he frowned slightly. "I don't want to limit myself," he said. "Not us. Myself." I noticed how often he framed ambition as income, how rarely he talked about fulfillment unless it came with a price tag. When I mentioned loving my job, he smiled indulgently. "That's great," he said, "as long as it's a stepping stone." A stepping stone to what? I didn't argue. I watched. Because conflict, when you sense it early enough, doesn't look like fighting. It looks like small adjustments, quiet compromises. You start shrinking corners of yourself without realizing it. I stopped bringing up work stories. He stopped asking. His parents grew bolder as the wedding approached. His mother asked if I'd ever considered pivoting into something adjacent. Education consulting, maybe. His father suggested I'd be wasted, staying in a classroom forever. No one ever asked if I was happy. Still, when he proposed, I said yes. Not because I felt pressured, but because I believed the disconnect was temporary. Because 3 years together felt like proof. Because I trusted that love would eventually outweigh metrics. The strange thing is, I wasn't afraid of the conversation about money. I was afraid of what it would reveal. The week before that dinner, he'd been restless, distracted, checking his phone more often. When I asked what was wrong, he brushed it off. "Just thinking about the future," he said. I assumed wedding stress, maybe cold feet. Everyone talks about pre-marriage nerves like they're normal. But the truth was simpler. He'd already made a decision. He just hadn't told me yet. And I'd been quietly preparing myself for the moment when the mask slipped, without even knowing I was doing it. Because when you've built something slowly, deliberately, in silence, you don't panic when tested. You wait, and you listen. The restaurant was his idea. A high-end Italian place tucked between glass office buildings, the kind with soft lighting and menus that didn't list prices. He said it felt like a good place to talk things through. I assumed it was about seating charts or guest lists, or whether we really needed 2 photographers. I wore a simple dress, nothing flashy. He complimented it, distractedly. We ordered. Wine for him, water for me. I noticed my hands were steady when I picked up the menu. That should have been my first clue. Halfway through our entrees, he put his fork down carefully, like he'd practiced the motion. "We need to talk about our future." Those words always arrive like a warning flare. They don't announce disaster, but they prepare you for it. "Okay," I said, "what's on your mind?" He took a breath, a long one. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our finances, about what our life will actually look like." "All right." "I don't think I can marry a teacher." The sentence landed between us, sharp and clean. I stared at him, waiting for context. A joke, a qualifier, something. "What?" I finally asked. "You're never going to make enough money," he said, matter of fact. "My dad made 6 figures my whole life. I grew up comfortable. I can't settle for struggling." "We're not struggling," I said slowly. He shook his head. "You make $65,000. That's barely enough for yourself. Forget about a family." I could feel the attention from nearby tables now. The subtle stillness when strangers sense tension worth listening to. He didn't seem to notice. "I make good money too, he continued, but I want more. I want to travel. I want a nice house. I want our kids in good schools. We can't do that on a teacher salary. The way he said it, teacher salary, like it was something unclean. So what are you saying? I asked. He didn't hesitate. I'm saying I can't do this anymore. I need someone with real ambition. Someone who wants more than just teaching. Something in me went quiet. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. I felt clarity. I understand your concerns, I said. He blinked. You do? Yes, financial security matters. You should marry someone who can give you the lifestyle you want. Relief washed over his face. Actual relief. I knew you'd understand, he said. We can keep this civil. No drama. I reached for my phone. Before we call it, I said, unlocking the screen, you should probably see something. I opened my investment app and turned the phone toward him. The number filled the screen. $891,247.63. His face went completely blank. What is that? My stock portfolio, I said calmly. I've been building it since I was 20. Started with $5,000 my grandfather left me. Invested $500 a month for 12 years. Compound interest. Dividends. He stared, didn't speak. I also have about $60,000 in high-yield savings. $40,000 in bonds. No debt. My car's paid off. No student loans. His voice cracked. That's almost $1 million. Yes. Silence stretched. So, I said quietly, just to be clear, you're ending our engagement because I'll never make enough money. But you had no idea I'm sitting on nearly $1 million in liquid assets. You never told me, he said weakly. You never asked, I replied. You saw teacher and assumed broke. Why wouldn't you tell me you had this much money? Because I wanted to be with someone who loved me for who I am, I said, not my bank account. His mouth opened, closed. I placed $200 on the table. That should cover dinner and the tip. I should go, I said, standing. Have a good night. Wait, he started. There's nothing to talk about, I said. You made yourself clear. I walked out before my hands could start shaking. They waited until I reached my car. My hands didn't start shaking until I closed the car door. Not while I walked out of the restaurant. Not when the valet handed me my keys. Not even when I pulled onto the street and the city lights blurred into long streaks across the windshield. It waited, like my body needed proof that I was alone before it let anything break. I drove home on muscle memory, jaw tight, breath shallow, heart pounding so hard I could feel it behind my ribs. Every red light felt accusatory, every second stretched. When I finally parked, I sat there in silence, palms pressed against the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. 12 years. That number kept repeating in my head. Not the money, not the engagement. The years I'd lived carefully, intentionally, without ever needing anyone's approval. I walked into my apartment, kicked off my shoes without lining them up, and poured myself a glass of whiskey. I rarely drink, but that night felt earned. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall. I thought about packing lunch every morning while Mark grabbed smoothies on his way to work. About driving my paid-off Civic while he upgraded phones, watches, luggage. About skipping expensive trips while he framed his spending as networking and lifestyle. He hadn't thought I was disciplined. He'd thought I was poor. Around 10, my phone lit up. Calls, texts, missed calls stacking on top of each other. His name, then his mother's. Then numbers I didn't recognize but immediately understood. I ignored all of it, flipped my phone face down, and went to bed, lying awake long after the room went dark. The knock came the next morning. I was stupid enough to open the door. Mark stood there holding a coffee from the place I liked, hair rumpled, eyes red like he hadn't slept. "Can we talk?" he asked. "I don't think there's much to say." "I was in shock last night," he said quickly. "I reacted badly. We can work through this." "Work through what exactly?" I asked. "I was stressed about money," he said. "I took it out on you." "And now that you know I have money," I said evenly, "suddenly everything's fine." He flinched. "That's not what this is." "Isn't it? Yesterday I wasn't enough. Today I was. The only thing that changed was a number on a screen." "We've been together for 3 years," he said. "That has to mean something." "It did," I said, "until you told me my career made me unmarriageable." "You're being ridiculous." "No," I said, "I'm being honest." He started crying, the messy kind. "Please don't throw us away," he said. "I made a mistake." For a moment I felt it, the pull. 3 years doesn't disappear overnight. Memories don't evaporate. Love doesn't switch off instantly. Then I heard his voice again. "I can't settle for struggling. The certainty, the contempt." "You need to leave," I said. He hesitated. Go, I said again. When the door finally closed, I rested my forehead against it and exhaled for the first time since the restaurant. The phone rang almost immediately. His mother, I answered. That was my mistake. Why are you doing this? He demanded. Mark says you're being cruel. Did he mention why we broke up? I asked. He said you disagreed about finances. He told me he can't marry a teacher because I don't make enough money, I said. Then I showed him my investment portfolio and suddenly he wanted to stay together. Silence. Then, well, teaching isn't exactly a high-paying career. I closed my eyes. I have almost $1 million saved and invested, I said quietly. You what? And that didn't matter to your son when he ended our engagement, I said. Only after. Another pause. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't stress. It wasn't fear. It was values. And once you see them clearly, there's no pretending you didn't. I thought blocking Mark would end it. Instead, it changed the shape of things. The noise didn't disappear. It rerouted. Like pressure in a sealed system, it searched for a different exit. My phone stayed quiet that morning. No calls, no texts. My email didn't. An email from his father sat there, unread, for almost an hour before I opened it. Long. Carefully worded. Polite in the way people are when they believe authority can be disguised as concern. He wrote about misunderstandings, about stress, about how emotions can cloud judgment after a breakup. Then he shifted, smoothly, into suggestions. Career adjustments, administrative roles, consulting, private tutoring, ways I could grow beyond the classroom. It wasn't advice, it was a correction. I replied once, short, neutral. I said I was satisfied with my career, the engagement was over, and I wished their family well. The response came almost immediately. You're making a huge mistake. Mark is the best thing that ever happened to you. I didn't answer. That's when Mark stopped pretending coincidence. He started appearing. The coffee shop I go to every Sunday morning, the grocery store near my apartment, the gym I'd belonged to for years. Suddenly he was scanning in behind me, avoiding eye contact like it was normal. Once could be chance, twice could be awkward, 3 times was intent. I called his brother, the only person in that family who'd ever spoken to me without looking down. Mark keeps showing up where I am, I said. There was a pause, then a tired breath. He's not handling this well, he admitted. He thinks you're being stubborn, that you'll come around. I need him to stop. I've tried, he said. My mom keeps telling him not to give up. That night, I was home grading papers when the doorbell rang. Every muscle in my body went still. I checked the peephole. Mark stood there with his mother. I didn't open the door. I started recording on my phone before I spoke. You need to leave, I said through the door. We just want to talk, his mother replied, voice tight with practiced patience. There's nothing to discuss. Mark spoke next. His voice was controlled, but strained, like he was forcing calm over something sharp underneath. We can fix this. We can't, I said. It's over. You can't just throw away 3 years, his mother snapped. I didn't, I said evenly. Mark did, at dinner. Silence pressed in, heavy, uncomfortable. Then she shifted tactics. You're being childish. I'm making a decision, I said. I don't want to marry someone who thinks my job is a failure. Mark exhaled hard. His breathing was uneven now. Not tears, not pleading, pressure leaking through restraint. I'm calling the police if you don't leave, I said. You wouldn't, his mother said. I stepped closer to the door and held my phone up to the peephole so they could see the recording light. I already am, I said. Do you want to test me? They left. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, my principal called me into her office. She didn't sugarcoat it. Mark's father contacted the district, she said. He's alleging you've become unstable since the breakup and that the situation could reflect poorly on the school if it escalates. My stomach tightened, but only briefly. That's not true, I said. I haven't contacted him once. I know, she said, but we need documentation. So I documented everything. Every call, every text, dates, times, who initiated, the emails, the doorbell video, the repeated coincidences. I built a timeline so precise it left no room for interpretation. When Mark texted from a new number, my dad just wants to help. If you apologize, we can move past this. I added it. When he followed with, you're throwing everything away over nothing, I added that too. Then came the message that stripped away any remaining doubt. You're exactly what I said you were, a nobody teacher who will end up alone. I didn't reply. I documented. The district reviewed the file. The narrative collapsed on contact. No evidence. No complaints from parents. Clear proof of who was initiating contact. Warnings were issued. Boundaries were formalized. Legal language entered the conversation. The pressure eased, not because they understood, but because intimidation stopped working. I wasn't shaken anymore. I was clear, because when someone tries to weaponize institutions to punish you for saying no, the relationship isn't just over. It's exposed. And once it's exposed, there's nothing left to negotiate. The quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm passes close enough to rattle the house, but not close enough to destroy it. Everything looks intact, yet nothing feels secure. For the first few days, I slept lightly. Every sound in the hallway outside my apartment registered as a threat. Footsteps, voices, the elevator dinging at the wrong hour. I double-checked the lock before bed, then checked it again after I turned off the light. During the day, I held it together. In the classroom, I was steady, focused, present, but the moment I was alone, the weight dropped. Not grief exactly, something colder. Doubt. I replayed the dinner over and over. His tone, his certainty, the way he'd said teacher salary like it disqualified me from adulthood. I wondered how long he'd been thinking it, how many conversations he'd had with his family before that night, how many judgments had already been made without me in the room. The thought that kept circling wasn't, did I do the right thing? It was, how close did I come to marrying someone who never respected me? That question hit hardest late at night. I stood in my kitchen one evening, holding a plate I didn't remember taking out of the cabinet, staring at nothing. My chest felt tight, not panicked, just hollow, like something essential had been narrowly missed, and my body hadn't caught up yet. I opened my laptop and stared at my investment dashboard without really seeing it. The numbers were there, solid, unmoved, proof of discipline, proof of foresight. None of it mattered in that moment, because money doesn't protect you from humiliation. It doesn't soften the realization that the person you planned a life with measured your worth by something you never offered as currency. I thought about the wedding that would never happen, the invitations half designed, the venue deposit, the conversations about table settings and playlists that suddenly felt absurd. I imagined standing across from him at the altar, knowing what I knew now, and felt a wave of nausea roll through me. That's when the fear finally surfaced. Not of being alone, but of how easily I'd almost accepted less. I received one more message that week, from a number I didn't recognize. You didn't have to destroy him like this. I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd refused to shrink. But in that dark pocket of doubt, the accusation stuck. I wondered if I'd been too calm, too decisive. If the lack of drama made me look cold. If walking away without pleading somehow made me the villain in other people's stories. That night I cried, quietly, briefly. Not because I missed him, because I'd come face to face with how conditional his love had been, and how easily I might have mistaken it for something real. The next morning, I woke up with a strange clarity. The heaviness was still there, but beneath it, something else had formed, harder, sharper, more grounded. I couldn't control what he told people. I couldn't control his family's narrative, but I could control what came next. And for the first time since the restaurant, I stopped reacting and started deciding. The shift didn't announce itself. There was no dramatic phone call, no public confrontation, no moment where I suddenly felt powerful. It was quieter than that. It started with a list. I sat at my kitchen table one Saturday morning, sunlight cutting across the wood in clean lines, and wrote down everything I could control and everything I couldn't. What I couldn't control was already familiar. What Mark said about me, what his family believed, what stories circulated in rooms I wasn't in. What I could control was simpler and heavier. My boundaries, my silence, my record. I stopped explaining myself to anyone who wasn't directly involved. When mutual acquaintances reached out with vague messages, I heard things got complicated. I replied politely and briefly. No details, no defense. The truth didn't need a campaign. At work, I met with my principal again. Calm, prepared. I handed over an updated timeline. She nodded as she read, her expression tightening, not at me, but at the pattern. You did exactly what you should have done, she said. If anything else happens, we escalate. Not emotionally, formally. That word stuck with me, formally. I changed my routines, not out of fear, out of intention. Different coffee shop, different gym hours. I updated my locks, limited my online presence. Quiet moves, strategic ones. And then I did something I hadn't expected. I told my story once. Not publicly, not dramatically, just accurately. A colleague I trusted asked gently if I was okay. I told her the truth. The dinner, the comment about my career, the sudden reversal when money entered the conversation. I didn't editorialize. I didn't soften it either. She listened. Then she said something that landed harder than anything Mark or his family had thrown at me. That's not love, she said. That's evaluation. She was right. Love doesn't put you on probation. It doesn't ask you to justify your worth retroactively. That was the moment the doubt finally broke. I stopped replaying the dinner, stopped wondering if I'd been too harsh, stopped questioning whether calm strength looked like cruelty to people who expected me to beg. I hadn't exposed Mark. He'd exposed himself when he thought it was safe to do so. The final shift came when his brother called me one evening. His voice sounded tired, older. I just wanted you to know, he said. My parents finally understand this isn't going to change. Mark's not doing great. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it, without guilt. He keeps saying you embarrassed him, his brother continued, that you made him look small. I closed my eyes for a second. I didn't make him look like anything, I said. I just didn't protect him from his own words. There was a pause. I know, he said quietly. I just thought you should know. It's done. They're backing off. When the call ended, I didn't feel victorious. I felt settled, because the power hadn't come from revealing a number or winning an argument or forcing an apology. It came from refusing to negotiate my dignity, from choosing not to return to a conversation that had already told me everything I needed to know. I cleared my table, closed my notebook, and for the first time since the engagement ended, the future felt open, not threatening. Not smaller. Mine. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in ripples, quiet consequences spreading outward, touching people who had assumed they'd never have to reckon with them. At work, things settled into a new normal. The district followed through exactly as promised. Mark's father was formally warned to cease contact. Any further communication would go through legal channels. The word liability entered the conversation, and just like that, the noise stopped. Institutions don't care about wounded pride. They care about patterns. Parents continued to send emails, thank yous, updates, small notes of appreciation about their kids. No complaints, no concerns. The narrative his family tried to float had nowhere to land. That didn't stop Mark from unraveling. I heard it secondhand, the way these things always travel, through people who don't mean to gossip, but can't help relaying what they've witnessed. Missed workdays, tension at the office, a reputation for volatility that hadn't existed before. Apparently, he told anyone who would listen that I'd humiliated him, that I'd tricked him, that I'd hidden money like it was a betrayal. No one asked him why he'd told me he couldn't marry a teacher. That detail didn't survive the retelling. His parents didn't fare much better. His mother grew defensive, then brittle. Friends stopped engaging when conversations turned circular, when every version of the story ended with the same grievance and no accountability. His father's confidence took a hit after the district pushed back. Power loses its edge when it fails publicly. And me? I stayed quiet. Not strategically quiet, peacefully quiet. I blocked the last remaining channels, changed my number, replaced the locks, returned the ring, not with a note, not with an explanation, just an envelope. Final. Clean. I didn't feel triumphant when it left my hands. I felt finished. Weeks passed, then months. The wedding date came and went without ceremony. I spent that weekend hiking with friends, phone tucked away, sunlight warming my shoulders. At one point, I realized I'd gone hours without thinking about Mark at all. That realization startled me more than any confrontation ever had. One afternoon after class, a student stayed behind. Nervous, fidgeting with the strap of her backpack. "Ms. Hayes," she said, "can I ask you something kind of personal?" I nodded. "My parents fight about money all the time," she said. "My mom says she should have married someone richer. My dad pretends it doesn't bother him, but it does. Is that normal?" I thought carefully before answering. "It's common," I said, "but it's not healthy." She nodded, absorbing it. "What matters," I added, "is whether someone respects who you are before they decide what you're worth." She smiled, small, relieved. "Thanks," she said. After she left, I sat at my desk for a long time. The irony didn't escape me. Mark had wanted ambition. He wanted impact. He wanted a life that meant something. And here I was, exactly where I'd always been, doing work that mattered quietly, steadily, without applause. My investments continued to grow. The numbers ticked upward, indifferent to drama. But the money wasn't the victory. The victory was that no one could use it to rewrite my value. When I heard, months later, that Mark had left his job, that his parents were suddenly worried about appearances instead of leverage, I felt something close to pity. Not because he suffered, but because he'd learned too late that respect isn't something you demand after the fact. It's something you either start with or never have at all. Life didn't dramatically improve overnight.
It softened.
The kind of softness that comes when you're no longer bracing yourself, no longer anticipating the next message, the next explanation, the next defense you might have to make for simply existing as you are. I kept teaching. I stood in front of my classroom every day, dry erase marker in hand, talking about revolutions and systems and power, how societies change not when someone yells the loudest, but when enough people quietly refuse to accept what no longer serves them. Sometimes I'd catch myself smiling at the irony. My finances stayed steady. My portfolio grew. But those were background details now. Like a strong foundation you stop thinking about once the house feels safe. I didn't feel the urge to prove anything anymore. Not to colleagues, not to friends, not to strangers. Especially not to men who confused income with identity. The strangest part was how little I missed him. I missed the idea of who I thought he was, the future I'd projected onto him, the version of myself I almost shrank into to make things easier. But I didn't miss the man who sat across from me and decided my profession made me unworthy of commitment. That clarity stayed with me. When people asked, carefully, if I regretted ending the engagement, I answered honestly. No, I said. I regret not seeing the warning signs sooner. Because love that requires you to hide parts of yourself isn't love, and respect that only appears after a balance sheet isn't respect. The lesson wasn't about money. It never was. It was about boundaries, about dignity, about understanding that someone who truly values you doesn't need to be convinced, doesn't need proof after the fact. They choose you as you are. I'm still a teacher. I still drive my old car. I still pack my lunch most days. I still invest quietly, patiently, without announcement. And I sleep better than I ever did while planning a wedding that would have cost me far more than it promised. Because I didn't lose a fiancé. I avoided a future where my worth would always be up for debate. And that, quietly, undeniably, was the richest outcome of all.